As the influence of gangs spiraled out of control in the 1990s, drugs and violence swept the streets of South Central Los Angeles. Though the gang subculture has always been male-dominated, female gang members were often designated as the caregivers, sacrificing their self-identity. This is the tale of two women and their struggles as they find new identities and discover spirituality within their communities.
I grew up in South Central Los Angeles um, in the late 70s, middle 70s, early 80s, into my 90s. Um, I'm I was raised by a single parent, which was my mother. I have two siblings that I was raised with, two brothers. I'm the middle child. My father was an absent parent. The only time that I would see him would be during the holidays or when I was acting out and my mother had to call him for discipline.
My mother died when I was about four and a half. Abusive background. My father was physically abusive. I had sexual molestation happen to me from various family members, something you don't talk about. My father was an unloving person. He didn't know how to extend love. He only knew how to extend discipline. So we grew up in that time area where kids, you're not supposed to be heard or seen, as a matter of fact. They say seen, not heard. They didn't want us to be seen or heard. So I grew up in that time era where parents didn't really have tolerance for children. We didn't have a voice. And so you compound that with physical and sexual abuse in a violent community. So violent home, violent community, violent schools, and that's what I grew up in as a child here.
I got some. When I was 19 years old, and I called myself setting up a drug deal, and it was this guy that I hadn't met, just being young, and this guy was a drug dealer, and we end up meeting up at a hotel. And I went in the hotel room prepared to get the guy's drugs. And when I got in there, the guy actually was thinking the same thing that I was thinking. But I was coming after the drugs, and he was coming after to rape me. And so when I got in there, I had began to talk to him, and I was sitting on the bed and we were talking, and I was preparing myself, and as we were in the conversation, when I looked up, he had a 9mm gun, and I had artillery too, but it was in my back. It was in the back. At that time, it was too late to even try to grab it. So I'm sitting there and I'm panicking though, and all that was going through my mind was, I'm not gonna make it back home to my son. I done messed up. This is it right here. And I was waiting just to hear the gun go off, because I knew right then that I was not gonna make it out of that hotel room.
This is what we call the hooker capital. This is Figueroa, where you have a lot of prostitutes, and now the demographic has changed because now they're kids out here, which before when we were coming up, there were a lot of people that were on drugs. So the little blue house right here, that's where my daughter's family owns this house. His car is still in the back. So he died over 30 years ago. They still have the car. I was murdered when I was pregnant. My homegirl used to stay in these apartments. Name was Rowena. So we used to hang out. We used to sell drugs out of these apartments right here. In the famous apartments that kind of started it all for me when I was homeless were these first set apartments here. So I used to hang out on the steps. I used to sleep here because I had no place to go. So it was an older lady named Gwen that took me in, and we used to sell drugs out here. And we used to hang out in the complex upstairs. She was the first apartment upstairs to the left. This little place right here, yeah, the street has definitely changed. So that's my dad's house. Oh God, he tried to do a little sidewalk, a little pavement or whatever. My friends used to live in this house right here. So, you know, we were always exposed to the drugs, prostitution since I was young. This wasn't here before. It used to be like a Norm's restaurant. So we would have to, you know, go through the dope sales and the drugs. And then you ask yourself, how do kids turn into this stuff? It's like, what choice do they have if this is all that they see?
I would tell you that I basically turned my life over to the streets. I was about 12 years old. Just having the absence of a male role in my life, I turned to gangs, and in the midst of that, I end up meeting a guy that I spent like about 11 or 12 years with. My culture, the culture that I come from, our background is when somebody hit you, you hit them back. So we would fight constantly. It even gotten to the point to where guns were involved, and objects were being used to protect myself. I would say this guy had a great influence on my life because he was 13 years older than me. So it was basically a relationship I was in where it was molestation. But at that time, I was not looking at it like that because I was just looking for love in all the wrong places. I was looking for my father figure. And at that time, he matched a father figure, so I thought.
Hold on 1 second. Is that Richard? This Leisha. What's up? How you doing, sir? Leisha. I grew up here. He's been on the street since I was like 12 or 13 years old. Hey, Richard.
What's going on?
How you doing, sir?
No, I can't see.
I know.
Oh, I just who you are. Yeah, you know I can't see it. Then you say, Felicia, your name didn't get right. Oh, that's right. I've been asking about you. You know, I know you've been doing big things with preaching and
Yes,
church and
sir.
everything,
Yes,
and
sir.
I'm glad to hear that.
Thank you,
So,
sir.
you know, I know where you come from and where we've been. Well, yeah, and I'm glad to hear that, baby. Shit, yes, ma'am. Man, this is my friend right here, Felicia, and she's like a little child to me. So I raised up as a child, and she was one of the toughest girls in the neighborhood. Dope dealing, fighting, all that kind of stuff went in her direction. I'm glad to see she where she at now.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
I had to go above and beyond because I was a woman, and the men would challenge you. Oh, you a woman, you a girl, you won't do this, you won't do that. And so I had to do what they said that I would not do because I had to make a name for myself. I had to let them know that I am what we would say down for the neighborhood. You know, so I would do certain things that were really, that could have taken my life or could have taken somebody else's life. I would do things that could have cost me prison time, you know, because I had to let it be known that I wasn't a punk per se, you know, that you would not be able to run over me. So that was a challenge for me in the neighborhood. And then again, with my age, the only thing that I could see was survival. And you're not going to run over me. You know, if you hit me, I'm gonna hit you back. You shoot at me, I'm gonna shoot you back, you know. So those kind of things right there. So it was very challenging because men are very challenging. They would challenge you in areas like that. And especially when they know, you know, they always say that the woman is the weaker vessel. And when you don't want to bow down, or you don't want that title or that name to be attached to you, you will come out of character. You would do things that you would normally not do. My thing was, I gotta make money because I have to survive. Nobody wouldn't hire me, didn't have any education. Was supposed to have been in school somewhere. That's what led to the drugs and, you know, being tangled up and tied up into the drug life.
Still Bill. I know that walk anywhere. Oh, William Purified. Come here, come say hi to me, man.
Hey, I'm the night about you.
I just talked to Richard. Come here. He used to be affiliated with the Black Panther Party before he got on drugs years ago. Very smart man. His name is William Purified. We call him Steel Bill. He had all kinds of rhymes. And then, you know, the crack epidemic swept. What's going on, sir?
Oh, I'm helping my friend.
How you been, Bill?
I've been asking about you.
I know, I just saw Richard. You doing good?
Yep.
You staying out of trouble?
Come on now. Oh yeah, I'm too old. You know, once a revolutionary, always a revolutionary. You could jail a revolutionary, but you can't jail the revolution.
Well, go on, preach then.
Power to the people, black and oppressed people. Hey, Panther power to the vanguard. In this world today, we need Jesus.
That's right.
Hey, you're looking good.
Thank you.
I've been asking your father about you.
Yeah, this is my friend Lily, so she been doing a little background.
Oh, that's
so,
all right.
Look,
I always wanted to be on TV.
yeah,
That's why-
so check this out, Bill. If you can give her a few words of who I used to be, can you give her?
Hey,
Go on with truth, Bill.
well, I better tell you the truth.
Tell the truth, Bill.
She was just like these people here call themselves Hoover Crips, shooting and so on. You don't want to tell me about that, do you? About no shootouts.
Go-
But anyway, let me keep it 100. Alicia, you know, I read a book one time, You Don't Give Up on Anybody. I hadn't given up on them, but I was wondering what was going to happen in her life that would make a change. Alicia was out here out of control. Woke me up one day, well, I'm not going to go up into
Go
detail.
Bill.
I heard gunfire. And I looked out, and who did I see? Crouched down like she was a marksman, and God is my witness. I don't know what type of automatic she had, but she was doing her thing. And then, like I told you, I come back in '01. Alicia was a born-again Christian, and that, whether or not she believed it, that mellowed me on now, because I didn't think, I better tell you, I didn't think it was any hope for a woman like her, because you can't, if you cause it, you're in trouble. And don't talk bad to her, you was in trouble. If you look at her wrong, Alicia was talking SHIT. But now, I believe she's a real Christian, and the Lord still have work for her to do. Keep it 100.
Thank you, Bill.
Oh, I bet tell you, it's lunchtime. No, I'm just joking. Hey, but take care. God bless
You said it's lunchtime. You need some money for lunch.
Yeah, well,
You
hey,
bet.
but check this out. I
You
thought
bet.
you was off in the gang intervention.
I am. I'm doing a little bit of everything.
Yeah, well, if one day I could ever do any public speaking, I appreciate it.
I sure will.
Uh,
You better go eat lunch with this money, because you know I'll come find you.
yeah, I know you will.
I ain't playing with you, Bill.
I know you will.
I
All
love
right,
you.
thank you. I love you too. And young lady, you keep it 100 with that camera.
I could hear this small voice, and I know why now that I heard it, because as I was growing up, my grandmother used to always tell me, if you ever get in trouble, try calling on the name of Jesus, which is God's son. And I couldn't say it out loud, but in my mind I was saying, Jesus, if I never needed you, I need you now. And the small voice began to speak to me. And I remember the small voice saying, tell him you have to use the restroom. And like I said in the sermon, I didn't have time to try to figure out where this voice was coming from. Right then, I was desperate, and desperate people do desperate things. So I listened to the voice. So I told the guy, I said, look, I have to use the restroom. Please just let me go to the restroom. I'm not gonna try to leave here, climb out the window or nothing. I promise I'll be right back. And the guy let me go to the restroom. And when I got in the restroom, I got on my knees and I could hear the voice say, do you remember as a little girl, you used to play Get On Your March, Get Ready, Get Set, and Go? And I'm saying, oh my goodness, yeah? He said, well, that's the game that we're going to play today. And he said, I'm gonna start off slow. He said, but when I tell you to go, you bust out of this room screaming to the top of your lungs and you start bamming on that door. And I said, okay. And the voice began to speak. The voice began to say, get on your march, get ready, get set. And when he said go, I shot out of the bathroom. And when I shot out, I startled the guy. And when I got to the door, I started bamming. And security guards started coming from everywhere. They kicked open the doors, and I was in there. I was in my bra and my underwear at that time because he was planning to rape me. And so they came in, and the guy got away. The guy got away, but my life was spared. And that's why I told the people, God would use something that you are familiar with. And the thing that I was familiar with was the game, get on your march, get ready, get set, go. And that's what he used to spare my life that day.
So still Bill and Richard, and those were the individuals you met. When I moved into the neighborhood, to that particular street, I was about 12, 13 years old. And so they used to be part of the Black Panther Party, especially Still Bill. He was very active. He got on drugs because, you know, the crack cocaine epidemic hit in the 80s and they both started smoking drugs. So as I grew up and started selling drugs and they were smoking drugs, they went from kind of mentors to my customers. And so they've seen me in a child state. They've seen me gang banging. They've seen me fist fighting and shooting at people, as Bill said, the shootouts we would have, and to now. So they've been around a long time, very knowledgeable. A lot of times they clean up and they get off drugs and they go right back. And you know, it's heartbreaking because you really want to see them change and get off drugs. Richard has started to lose his sight. I can't remember what his actual physical ailment is, but it is impeding his sight. So he's not able to really get around as much. But just years of using drugs, and it's starting to deteriorate the body.
If you would allow me to use my Holy Ghost imagination, I would say there were impassable mountains on two sides of them. If you can imagine this, they had the sea in front, and behind them in hot pursuit was the Egyptian army chasing them down. Doesn't that sound like many of us today? The minute that we're delivered from one thing, we look up to find something else chasing us down. And if it ain't one thing, it is another. And I've discovered as long as you live, there will always be something that you need to be delivered from. That should have just freed about 3 of y'all. Hallelujah. Glory be to God. I work a lot in the church. I speak at certain type of engagements, a lot of youth engagements I go to, even for women, battered women. I speak for battered women. I speak at my church for purity classes because I'm so grateful that I made it out. And I don't believe that it was by accident that I went through what I went through. I truly believe that I went through because there was a young lady that was going to come behind me that was going to go through the same thing that I went through, and I would be able to walk her through it without her having to suffer the years that I did. If I can be honest with you, what really brought me out was I began to read the Bible. And I began to read things in the Bible to where it was telling me that I was made in God's image and after his likeness. And I'm like, okay, if God created the world and he called everything good, that means that I'm good. I'm not what people have said that I am. So these are the type of strategies and the tools that I use. I'm a believer in God, so I strictly stick to that, because that in the darkest hours of my life, that's what stopped me from committing suicide. That's what brought me out of depression. That's what caused me to love my children the way that I never was loved.
Our next panelist, Alicia Cass. Alicia Cass is a survivor. She is a former drug dealer, gang member, abuse victim, teenage mom, and high school dropout. Alicia has checked all the statistical boxes, but when God changed her life, she added University of Southern California Masters of Social Work graduate to her resume. She's a proud mother of 8, and she's a minister. So please help me welcome Alicia Cass.
Well, I wasn't expecting that. You know, I came out of foster care, me and my siblings, and I was that child that you did not want to see in your home. I was the liar. I was the one that did all of those things. And if it's the one thing that I'm going to camp on this morning, I'm going to camp on the trauma aspect of that.
Today we did a panel, we did a women's workshop for women empowerment and women's voices. We talked about domestic violence in the home, sexual abuse in the home, physical abuse as children, and then women still have to go out in the community and deal with community violence. And what does that say for the woman? And how do we ask for help? And how do we receive help? How do we be helpers one to another? And how do we link all the pieces to the puzzles that we can actually breathe? Because I think a lot of times we're suffocating because we're overworked, we're overwhelmed. And the community has drawn this roadmap that women are caretakers. And it doesn't allow us to say we're tired, especially in my culture. You don't say you're tired because their response is, well, we did it, can't you?
I watch children from the ages of 0 months to the age of 13. Right now, I have a total of 7 children. When I first started off, I had my first 2. I'm licensed for 14. It's a large family daycare. And we're basically just family around here. And the outside area is where they actually can play at. Gets really hot in the Antelope Valley, so a lot of times they have to stay inside. But when they're not inside, they're out here. I have slides for them. They have their little picnic area, which has to be cleaned up right now, but we picnic out here also. We have the tables. This is what my everyday life is about, just pouring inside of the children. And then when I'm not doing this, I'm out in the community. I'm feeding those that are less fortunate. I'm clothing those that are less fortunate. I even go to the hospitals and visit the sick that are there, and I pray for them, and whatever I can help them with, I'm even open to even going into the people's houses and helping them clean and getting things situated so when they transition back from the hospital, they come home to a clean house. We cook for them. Just a lot, wherever the help is needed in the community, that's what I'm about doing.
This book has been in the making for about 20 years. So I knew 20 years ago I would write a book. It was finding the courage to do so. It was talking about sexual abuse, physical abuse, generational and cultural traumas that as African American women you're not allowed to discuss. It is the known taboo, it's the silent rules that you don't discuss those things. I grieved that I never had a childhood. I've been on my own since I was 15 years old. I've been in the streets since I was 15 years old. And so finally able just to cry over not having a mother. When I was writing the book towards the end, I finally got something that had my mother's name on it. I finally did it. It took me a long time fighting the right editors, the right people. They would look at the content and go, oh no, we're scared for you. I'm like, scared of what? And they're like, the things you're saying. But it was the truth. So they wanted me to alter the truth, not my truth, the truth, and I wouldn't do it. You're not the editor for me. So I had to keep moving on. And what it said to me is society, some of society really don't want the hard truth of what black girls or Latina girls or any girls go through when they're abused. They don't want to hear that truth. My nonprofit Metamorphosis experience, that came as a result one day I was at church and I was praying for a couple of people, and it had been months of a lot of people that had been sexually abused, men and women alike. I originally thought it was going to be a support group only, and it just morphed into something greater. It morphed into helping women and youth. It morphed into gang intervention and prevention, and why girls join gangs, and why we go out there, why we commit crimes from a woman's perspective, and why we do the things that we do. Church saved my life. Going into church, I began to love myself. I began to study the Bible. I began to see what God really meant when He made man, and just the compassion and the teachings, and even for people that don't believe in God or Jesus. It is some of the most sound doctrine, and it helped me change my perspective. It helped me love myself. I had to allow the abuse to die and stop living through that abuse and allow something to grow, because my whole identity and being was part of abuse. Me always taking care of men, and not financially, but I was always the caretaker, help them out, do this, do that, and never taking care of myself. That abusive history had to die. Getting saved and coming to the church, allowing that stuff to be purged, and I began to love everybody, all people, and it was a true transformation for me, because I was morphed. So I went from crawling on the ground, not knowing who I was, angry and hurt, until the cocoon stage where I was beginning to crystallize, and I'm changing, and it's a struggle, because I don't want to live in a house with you punching on me anymore. I don't want to tolerate you. I want you out of my life. It was a fight. And so when I finally morphed and got out of that, I just began to fly.